Austin Hill signed a multi-year contract extension with Richard Childress Racing, and could 2311 Racing potentially head to Ford? Let's go ahead and talk about it. What's going on, guys? It's Daniel, and welcome back to the video. We got a ton of NASCAR and other motorsports stories discussed here today on the channel. Let's go ahead and just shove straight into those really quickly. We're going ahead and start talking about Gold Bowling. As it was announced yesterday that Gold Bowling has announced a multi-year extension as entitlement partner for the Cup race at Watkins Glen. Gold Bowling has been entitlement sponsor, I believe, since either 2018 or 2019. So really good to see if they're going to continue their entitlement with Watkins Glen. A pretty big company. Amazing and awesome to see if they're going to continue their partnership with the company. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Horizon Hobby. Now, Horizon Hobby is a big RC brand, and they got their first win as a sponsor in the NASCAR Cup Series at the Indy Road Course. Horizon Hobby, like I said, massive RC partner, got their first win, Michael McDowell, in the Cup Series. They've been a huge partner of front row racing for the last couple of years, so really glad to see they're able to get the victory. Really awesome and amazing stuff. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the Cup Series race at Watkins Glen. Now, the Cup Series race at Watkins Glen was only 1 hour and 58 minutes. That is the fastest Cup race in NASCAR modern history, and the fastest Cup race since the 1971 Buddy Schumann 250. The last two NASCAR Cup Series races combined have been about 4 hours combined. Last week's race was 2 hours and 9 minutes, and this week's race was 1 hour and 58 minutes. So it's really interesting to see how fast the NASCAR Cup Series race was. Pretty interesting stuff, and glad to see we got a pretty fast-paced race, though I don't think the racing was the most exciting in the world. I still think it's pretty cool and pretty awesome to see that we got a pretty fast and a really quick race. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Bubba Wallace. Now, after the NASCAR Cup Series race, Bubba Wallace spoke to the media and NASCAR and NBC. And he said that he got some advice and spoke to Scott Dixon. And he gave a huge shout out to Scott Dixon. And Scott basically told him to shut the hell up and said, "You are here for a reason." It's really cool to see Scott Dixon giving Bubba Wallace advice. He had a really awesome road course race. Probably the best road course race all around he's had at this point in his NASCAR Cup Series career, where he finished 12th, ran top pretty much the whole day long. And it's huge for Bubba Wallace because obviously, like we said, Bubba Wallace historically not been the greatest road course racer ever. So it's amazing to see him go out and have a fantastic road course race. And I love the fact you have drivers like Scott Dixon and other forms of racing being there to coach and help Bubba Wallace all around. He really needed this. This was an absolute huge confidence booster for him. And I think this is absolutely huge and amazing to see that he's getting advice from someone like Scott Dixon to try to get better on road courses and improve. So really awesome stuff. You could definitely tell he was getting emotional for sure. And really interesting, but awesome to see that Scott Dixon was there to help out Bubba Wallace. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jack Aiken. As it was announced, I believe on Thursday or Friday, that Jack Aiken will drive the 31 for Action Express Racing in 2024. He'll be teaming up with Ronnie. Alexander Sims, I believe, is going to be headed to Corvette, if I'm not mistaken, so he will not be back with Action Express Racing in 2024. But Jack Aiken has done a pretty good job with the 31 team in the past. He ran with them with the Rolex 24 in 2023. So I think this is an absolute huge pickup for him. I think he's going to have a pretty solid gear. I think he's going to be somewhat a threat. I think he's going to be somewhat of a contender with this car, and it wouldn't surprise or shock me if we see Action Express Racing go out there and to be able to contend for the victory. So awesome to see that Jack Aiken will be driving for this team in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jordan Taylor. As it was announced, I believe the same day that Jack Aiken got announced, that Jordan Taylor will be returning to Wayne Taylor Racing in 2024 to compete for the championship. He will also be teammates with Louis Delatraz, who's been driving Wayne Taylor Racing the last year or two. Jordan Taylor has driven for Wayne Taylor Racing in the past, drove for them as won the Rolex 24 a couple times, especially in 2017 when Jeff Gordon was on that team. Jordan Taylor, obviously, though, for the last 4 or 5 years, has been driving for Corvette Racing. He's been very competitive with the Corvette Racing organization and has done a really great job with the team. I think this is a really great and awesome pickup to go back to Wayne Taylor Racing. I would imagine he'll be teammates once again with Ricky Taylor. I would imagine maybe Alexander Rossi or Philippe Albuquerque probably will be back with the team in 2024. So to me, it's really awesome that Jordan's going to be back racing full-time with Wayne Taylor Racing. Hope he gets to run some NASCAR races, of course, but really awesome and great to see that we're going to see Jordan Taylor back with Wayne Taylor Racing. Really awesome and really cool to see that he's back. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Dexter Bean. As it was announced last Thursday that Dexter Bean is going to drive the 21 for his own organization, Blackjack Racing, reviving a team racing this weekend at the Milwaukee Mile. For those of you who do not know about Blackjack Racing, I believe this team attempted to run some NASCAR Cup Series races back in the 2009 season. Albeit, I don't think they made a lot of races because the equipment wasn't there. But it's really cool to see one that the number 21 car is even back in the Truck Series. Hasn't been in the Truck Series, I think, since 2020 or 2021, when I believe Zane Smith drove that truck. But also, it's really cool to see Dexter Bean continues to race. Obviously, he ran part-time in the Cup Series. Been kind of running part-time the last few years in NASCAR in general, too. So I think it's really cool and amazing to see that we're going to see Dexter Bean back in the Truck Series, and really awesome as well to see that he'll be driving and reviving the Blackjack Racing organization. Hopefully, he can do a really awesome and really good job with Blackjack Racing. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about the SRX. Now, it was reported by Michael Massey from Front Stretch. He interviewed Don Hawk from the Asterix, and Don Hawk confirmed that the Asterix will be back on ESPN in 2024, and the dates have already been set. Now, big question I have when it comes to the Asterix is, will it be on Thursday nights once again, or is it going to basically be back on Saturday evenings? Because let's be honest, the TV ratings for the Asterix on Thursday nights were not very good. They only averaged about, I think, 300 to 350,000 viewers, maybe even sometimes less than that on a consistent basis. Don't get me wrong, the racing was really, really awesome and really, really good. But here's the issue and here's the problem. When you have races, especially late on, basically on Thursday nights, ratings and cable in general is a dying breed. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, ESPN now has less viewers on cable than FS1. Because, of course, a lot of those debate shows that do come up and less people are watching because of that. To me, I think it is disappointing to see the ratings were not that, because I think there was a lot of hype, but also going into next year as well, one, promotion needs to be higher. There was a lack of promotion on social media this year, and that's no disrespect. You can't just rely on social media, but you can't just rely on social media. You have to basically promote your events on your networks. And if you don't promote it, you're not going to have a lot of people that are going to tune in. But a lot of people did not know about the Asterix. Don't get me wrong, the racing was good, but hopefully next year when it does return, one, maybe back on Saturday nights or Friday evenings, and maybe not on Thursday nights anymore, because the ratings are not that great, especially on cable. And that's something I think that does need to change going forward in the foreseeable future, because in my opinion, that was a big negative draw for the Asterix, was a lack of TV ratings. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson. As there was a report on Motorsport.com earlier in the week that Kyle Larson's 2024 Indy 500 rookie orientation test will be in October. Now, a lot of people are wondering, obviously Kyle Larson is going to be running the 2024, and I also believe is going to be running the 2025 Indy 500 as well with Aaron McLaren. Obviously, the paint scheme has been revealed that he's going to run. He's going to drive the number 17. It's going to be HenderCars.com car. It's going to look very similar to Scott Dixon's car. But a lot of people have been wondering who is going to be the person that's going to be coaching him. Look no further than Tony Kanaan. Tony Khan's been as a higher up now at Aaron McLaren and the McLaren organization. And also Tony Khan has worked with Kyle Larson in the past when they worked together to win the 2015 Rolex 24 at Daytona. I think if there's anybody, especially, and also, of course, because you have Tony Khan, who's also a former winner of the Indy 500 as well back in 2013. I think Kyle Larson is going to be getting a lot of really awesome or really great advice from Tony Kanaan. I think this is a great pickup to work with Larson, and I think Kyle Larson seriously has a really great chance and a really great potential opportunity to win the Indy 500 in 2024. We'll have to wait and see what happens. I think this orientation test is going to be really, really exciting, and I'm excited to see that Kyle Larson is going to be running the 2024-25 Indy 500s, and we'll have a rookie orientation test coming up relatively soon. And now we're going ahead and jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Josh Berry. As it was announced on Friday morning that Josh Berry will drive the 42 for Legacy Motor Club this weekend at Daytona International Speedway. Josh Berry's already made a start with Legacy Motor Club this year in 2023 when he drove in Michigan and unfortunately ended up crashing out. Now, right now, that plan is only set past Daytona. They haven't announced what other drivers are going to drive the 42 car. Obviously, Noah Gragson is no longer going to be driving the 42 car in 2023, as he himself requested to be released from the Legacy Motor Club organization, but there have been rumors suggesting that regardless, Noah Gragson was going to be out, whether he decided to leave the team or not. Look, I think it's going to be very interesting to see who else gets behind the wheel. I like to see maybe a driver like Matt DiBenedetto get a chance and opportunity. Maybe they give an opportunity to a driver like Daniel Hemrick, even Grant Enfinger maybe makes a few starts. Or maybe Josh Berry could run the rest of the races for the team, considering he is still the Chevy development driver. But remember, he's going to be going to Ford next year to drive for Stewart-Haas Racing. Nonetheless, I'm glad to say that Josh Berry will be back with this weekend. It's going to be more Cup experience for him. Hopefully he can survive the carnage, survive the wrecks, and have a really strong and good run, because he needs to have a good run to get more Cup experience. He struggled at times here, but also has ran relatively good at times in 2023. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Alex Palou and McLaren. Now, you've already talked a little about the Alex Palou and McLaren situation, but it was announced last week or 2 weeks ago that Alex Palou will not honor his deal with McLaren and has left his management company with Monaco. Well, it was reported by Nathan Brown from the Indy Star that McLaren, Aaron McLaren, and McLaren have jointly filed a pair of lawsuits against Alex Palou and Alpha Racing in British and UK court. This is really, really interesting. It does not shock and surprise if they have filed basically a lawsuit, because remember, Alex Palou was supposed to go to McLaren in 2024. But really the only reason why he wasn't going to be really driving for Aaron McLaren. The plans was he's hoping that there was going to be an F1 ride that was going to be available, because the only reason you would go to McLaren is have an opportunity and a chance to drive in Formula 1. But because of the fact that there's not going to be an open seat in Formula 1 in 2024 that's really competent and really good to go to next year, why would you leave Chip Ganassi Racing when that team has been really, really fast and really competitive this year? Alex Palou is likely going to win the championship this weekend at Gateway, so why would you leave? So it makes a lot of sense at this point, and it's really good for Chip Ganassi. We saw Chip Ganassi come out and basically defend Alex Palou and went after the Aaron McLaren team, which is really surprising and kind of shocking, but not shocking at the same time. So in my honest opinion, when it comes to this, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. We'll continue to follow up in the story as time goes on. I imagine that they'll honor the deal where basically he'll be out of the contract. I don't think it's going to be long after this whole thing is done. I'm not surprised, though, that there has been a lawsuit sent against Alex Palou because of this. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode, as we're talking about Chase Elliott. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race yesterday, you saw the blundered call by Alan Gustafson. So Chase Elliott had actually come in earlier in the race on lap 17 or lap 18 to come down the road to try to get in clean air, because it was very difficult and really, really hard to pass yesterday, especially at the end of the race, where in the final 30 laps, there was not a single change up in the top 6 positions. Well, Chase Elliott tried to get in clean air. And they had told him on the radio that basically he had 3 extra laps of reserve fuel. He flips the switch and runs out of gas and brings out the only caution in this race, which is really, really, I think, an inexcusable mistake by Alan Gustafson and by the team in general, especially since the fact that Chase Elliott has not locked into the Plas. How are you that far off on the strategy calls? Again, I think Alan Gustafson is a solid crew chief. I don't think he's a great crew chief, though. And he isn't someone who's done, well, he's done a lot, I should say, as a crew chief, but he just made a really, really bad call. Now, I've seen a lot of people on social media discussing this and debating this, whether or not he should be fired from the team and let go from the team or move into an executive position. Listen, I know a lot of people bring up the drivers that he's worked with, Kyle Busch, Mark Martin, Jeff Gordon, now Chase Elliott. But Alan Gustafson has won 38 races as a crew chief in the NASCAR Cup Series. That is still a lot of wins. And remember, he worked with a young Kyle Busch in the first 3 years of his career, and he still won 4 races there. He worked with Mark Martin in 2009 and won a championship with him. And he worked with Jeff Gordon and really helped Jeff Gordon get near the end of his career. And let's remember, Jeff Gordon had a lot of back injuries near the end of his career. I don't think Alan Gustafson needs to be fired. I think they'll get it worked out. I think they'll get it sorted out, and they'll get the issues kinked out so that Chase Elliott next year can be better. Again, and it's also not Alan Gustafson's fault that Chase Elliott's going to miss the playoffs. I'm sorry, but Chase Elliott had a bad Saturday and really had that skiing or snowboarding injury, and then of course he basically did the retaliation. He might be in a better position if none of those things end up happening. Some of it out of control, some of it in his control. So I don't want people completely blaming Alan Gustafson for Chase Elliott also making mistakes at the same time as well. So while I think there does need to be some responsibility handed to Alan Gustafson, I don't think Alan Gustafson needs to be fired for that, in my opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sean Ronnie. As it was announced on Friday afternoon that Sean Ronnie is going to drive the 61 for Tory Racing and make his debut this weekend at the Milwaukee Mile. Now, I've already given my thoughts on Sean Ronnie after what happened at Mid-Ohio. Has he won a few races in ARCA West this year? Yes, and that shows a little bit of talent. However, Sean Ronnie has done a lot of really stupid moves. But the Truck Series fits perfectly considering there is not a lot of respect in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series nowadays. But man, why couldn't a driver like Lane Brace get a chance and opportunity to drive this car? Because Lane Brace would probably have a chance to win with the Tory Racing organization. I'm expecting Sean Ronnie to kind of struggle, unfortunately. We've seen a Tory Racing outside of when Chris Sabell's driven. We've seen a Tory Racing organization over the last 2 years kind of flounder and kind of fumble. I don't think Sean Ronnie is going to do a really good job, unfortunately. I think he's sadly going to struggle. I think he's going to be finishing kind of near the back of the pack and kind of near the back of the field. Well, not the back of the back, but I think he's going to finish around 20th to 25th, probably in the race. Probably end up finishing a lap down, unfortunately, and not having a good run overall. So I'm not expecting much of Sean Ronnie. I think he's going to struggle, and I'm not really sure why he's getting a chance and an opportunity to drive this car, because in my opinion, the only reason he's there is because of Daddy's money. He wouldn't be there in any other reason, because he has not done much, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Motorsports games. Now, I've not really had a chance and opportunity to cover this story, but it was reported by Mike Straw, and shout out to Darian for basically retweeting and talking about this as well. But it sounds like that the exclusive license with NASCAR that Motorsports games has is going to be ending on September 30th. And according to Mike Straw, it does sound like that there could be multiple developers that might have a chance and opportunity to develop NASCAR games. Now, it is no secret that NASCAR and Motorsports games have not really had a great relationship. Look at the games that have come out for Motorsports games. They've only released one, and it was arguably the worst NASCAR game of all time. On top of that as well, you basically have had a lot of blunders. There's been a lot of stuff that's come out from the CEOs, and the higher-up management has done a terrible job. And a lot of the people that have worked in Motorsports games have been announcing that they're leaving Motorsports games to go find something else to do at this point. Look, I do feel bad for a lot of people that work at Motorsports games because they did do, I think, as good of a job as they can. Here is the issue. The upper management and the lack of resources. That was a huge reason why Motorsports games blundered. Now, there is still a chance of possibly there might be a game coming out from Motorsports games, but let's talk about the future. This is something that needed to happen for a very, very long time. Multiple developers coming in and basically making games. When NASCAR gaming was at its peak in the early 2000s, and there was no exclusive license. Exclusive licenses basically stay with complacency. When you have multiple companies, it creates competition. And it's something that's been a big issue with the gaming atmosphere in general, but be different. Don't have exclusive license like all other sports games have, like F1 does. Make yourself have multiple games and make the market decide what is the better game. Because competition creates more demand and more possibilities to be better. I expect this announcement to come on September 30th, which was what a lot of people have been saying is when this announcement is expected to come. And nonetheless, I'm very happy that they're losing the exclusive license because, in my opinion, they have deserved to lose it for a very, very long time. And I'm glad to say that it looks like that they're going to be losing the exclusive license, which I think is good for everybody all around in this industry. And it has needed to happen for a very, very long time. And now we're going to hedge on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Jason White and Chris Hacker. As it was reported basically on the same day that both drivers were suspended indefinitely by NASCAR. Now, why were they suspended? They were both arrested. Now, what were they arrested for? Driving while impaired. Both drivers have competed in the NASCAR Truck Series this year, and also I believe Jason White has made maybe an Xfinity Series start so far in 2023. Also needs to be noted that it's the American Jason White and not the Canadian Jason White, so people are not confused. But both drivers have been running in the Truck Series this year. Chris Hacker's drove in the 30 truck and also other trucks like the 02 truck, and has also made a couple Xfinity Series starts as well. And Jason White has also made quite a few starts with Tricon Garage this year. it is really disappointing stuff to hear, and honestly unexcusable at this point that you're driving while impaired. Especially when you're a driver in NASCAR, you need to make a better example, and you can't be doing that in my opinion. So I'm not shocked and surprised they've been suspended, and definitely I really hope both Chris Hacker and Jason White get the help they need and they can get back to the racetrack as soon as possible. Obviously, I think they will. I hope they, like I said, I really hope they knew that it was inexcusable what they did, and they know that they need to be better in that situation. So I'm glad that basically they know they need to be better, but I think NASCAR absolutely made the right call and the right decision to go ahead and suspend both drivers. And definitely there was another person that was suspended. I'm not going to get into those specific details because honestly the details are very, very gruesome and really, really gross. But honestly, I'm not shocked and surprised that both Jason White and Chris Hacker have been suspended, because also Jason White forgot to basically report to NASCAR that he had done that and had gotten arrested, and you were supposed to announce that early in the week. So I'm not surprised and shocked they both have been arrested, but they both have been arrested for DWIs. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Marco Andretti. Now, Marco Andretti, I believe it was on Thursday or Friday, put out a tweet basically teasing his future plans. Now, obviously, Marco Andretti is talking about this, and he talked about this at Mid-Ohio, but he said he's teasing potentially running full-time or wanting to race full-time in NASCAR in 2024. But that's not the only thing I noticed. I noticed an IMSA badge. Now, I do believe that Marco Andretti has been attempting to race in IMSA and was supposed to make some IMSA starts with his cousin, Jarrett Andretti. And basically, we're supposed to be teammates in the LMP3 class, which Jarrett Andretti has done a pretty solid job in IMSA in his short career up to this point. Now, Marco Andretti, I really hope he gets to run full-time in NASCAR, though. That's the main reason I want to talk about this, because it sounds like Marco Andretti does want to run full-time in NASCAR in 2024. Of course, he's ran a few full-time Asterix seasons this year, and honestly, he's done a pretty solid job and a pretty good job in the Asterix this season. Of course, in the last years, he won the championship last year, 2022, and of course, he went on to finish second or third in a championship in 2023. I think it'd be cool. He did make Xfinity Series start last for Big Machine Racing, got crashed out of that, and then of course made his Truck Series debut with Spire Motorsports, which I think if he does go full-time in the Truck Series in 2024, I think it is going to be with the Spire Motorsports organization. They're a really good organization, they're a really good group, and they've shown some good pace and speed. They've also won with Kyle Larson, and have shown some pretty good speed with other drivers like Alex Bowman throughout the last couple years, and William Byron as well, as also won for the team. They've also had Corey LaJoie and Lane Riggs, which Lane Riggs had a top 5 run, which is very, very impressive with the team. So it'd be really cool to see Marco Andretti full-time next season, and I hope he does get the chance and opportunity to run full-time in the Truck Series in 2024, because I think it'd be really fun. I think it'd be really awesome, and nonetheless, it sounds like there's a chance and possibility that could end up happening in 2024. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Ryan Truex. Now, we already kind of talked about us on the channel earlier this year, but Ryan Truex will be returning to Joe Gibbs Racing, at least on a part-time basis, for 2024. Mark Truex Jr. had stated that they are trying to find ways to get Ryan Truex a chance and opportunity to run full-time in the 2024 season. And on Thursday, Ryan Truex put out a tweet asking for sponsorship and partners so that he can run full-time in 2024. I really hope he can get the sponsorship funding to run full-time in the 2024 season. Because in my opinion, Ryan Truex in the select races that he's ran for Joe Gibbs Racing, I think he's done a really awesome and really good job. And it's not just based off the win he had at Dover. You look at where he ran pretty much all year long in the select race he ran in 2022 and 2023. He got a couple top 5s and top 10s last year, 2022. And in 2023, he had a second place finish at Phoenix. I think he had a top 2 or top 3 at Atlanta. And he also had a really, really strong run winning that race at Dover and was always up front and extremely competitive. And it's a shame he wasn't able to run full-time this year, because like I said, I think Ryan Truex has done a really good job in the Xfinity Series here, and I think he easily could win an Xfinity Series championship this year had he were able to run full-time. If they can get the funding and sponsorship for the run full-time in 2024, though, and he runs for Joe Gibbs Racing, because there's obviously a lot of talk about maybe some changes coming with Joe Gibbs Racing, Xfinity Series team, obviously John Nemechek maybe moving up full-time in the 2024 season to the Cup Series. I think he would be an absolute championship threat and contender, especially if Ben Bayshore is a crew chief there. I think he'd do a really awesome and really, really good job. So I hope they can find the funding, find the sponsorship, and hopefully Ryan Truex gets a chance and opportunity to run full-time in the NASCAR Xfinity Series in the 2024 season. Hopefully they can find the funding and sponsorship. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Kyle Larson versus Austin Dillon. Now, if you watched the NASCAR Cup Series race yesterday, you saw what happened on the last lap between Kyle Larson and Austin Dillon. Both drivers had contact on the last lap. They were both battling, I think, for around 18th or 19th position. Austin Dillon, I think, at first got into the back of Kyle Larson and moved him down the racetrack. And then Kyle Larson went way up the racetrack and ran into Austin Dillon, turning both him and Austin Dillon around, and they both ended up crashing. Kyle Larson came across the line in 26th position, and we saw Austin Dillon finish in 31st. And after the NASCAR Cup Series race, Austin Dillon went to confront Kyle Larson, and admittingly, he was not very happy with Kyle Larson after the incident and after the crash, which I think is justified from Austin Dillon, though. Kyle Larson gave him a thumbs up, and I think a lot of it is because a lot of drivers in the garage probably do not have a lot of respect for Austin Dillon. Now, who's at fault for the situation? Look, I think Kyle Larson's more at fault. Unfortunately, look, I'm more a fan of Kyle Larson, but I do believe that Kyle Larson is more at fault because he basically bulldozed in the corner. I don't think he intentionally meant to wreck Austin Dillon. I think he was just trying to pass him near the end, and it was the last corner. But I think at the same time, I just think it was overall kind of a bad move on Kyle Larson's part because it makes Kyle Larson kind of look a little bit bad. But I think it was really funny to see Kyle Larson give Austin Dillon the thumbs up, which I think shows that, again, I don't think a lot of people in this industry have a lot of respect for Austin Dillon in the garage, which is a shame because he's been a big reason why RCR has been good this year. At least we're bringing Kyle Busch in, even though I will say Austin Dillon has not been good himself as a driver in the Cup Series, so I will put more blame on Keith Rodden than anything else because I think Keith Rodden is a very lackluster crew chief. That being said, in my opinion, will we see payback from Austin Dillon in the future? Maybe, because again, Kyle Larson now has some enemies going into playoffs, considering Austin Dillon, he could be in the playoffs, but probably won't be in the playoffs unless he wins Daytona like he did last year. But still, in my opinion, it's very interesting to see that both drivers got into it. To me, though, I think more blame sadly goes on Kyle Larson. I think maybe a little bit overreaction, but then again, I did hear there might have been a little more to this story than what we saw from the TV cameras. A little bump, and I think Larson probably didn't mean to wreck him, but at the same time, you do have to put a little more blame on Austin Dillon. Actually, more blame on Kyle Larson at this point, because like I said, I think Kyle Larson is more at fault for the situation than Austin Dillon, in my honest opinion. And now we're going to head on to the next story of today's episode as we're talking about Sam Mayer versus Ty Gibbs. Now, if you watch the NASCAR Xfinity Series race on Saturday, you saw the incident between Sam Mayer and Ty Gibbs. So on one of the late race restarts, and let's get a little context, Ty Gibbs had dominated the NASCAR Xfinity Series race. There was a caution that came out with 6 laps to go. Sam Mayer and I believe maybe Parker Kligerman or Justin Allgaier had stayed out because they were trying to make it on field. So Ty Gibbs sent it, I believe, to the outside and tried to pass Sam Mayer on the restart because he was the best on restarts throughout the day. He got to the outside of Sam Mayer and passed him. Sam tried to get him back through the S's, and Ty Gibbs came down in front and put a block on Sam Mayer. Then he heard on the radio that Sam Mayer was not very happy with Ty Gibbs after the incident. He was basically attempting maybe he was going to wreck him. Well, his spotter, Kevin Hamlin, had told him, don't wreck him. We've had these issues before. You might get suspended or get a penalty if you end up retaliating against him. Well, on the restart, Sam Mayer, in fact, did retaliate against Ty Gibbs, spinning him out and collecting Austin Hill in the process, and Sam Mayer would go on to win the race, holding off Sheldon Creed. Sheldon Creed had actually passed Sam Mayer, but Sam Mayer got back around because of all the oil on the racetrack. After the race, Sam Mayer spoke to Kim Kuhn, and Sam Mayer says the Xfinity drivers should go on to win. He didn't admit it, which I think is really cool to see. He didn't admit that he basically wrecked Ty Gibbs for the win. Sam Mayer didn't admit because, again, he could get a penalty for admitting. He said Xfinity drivers should win. I just will hop the corner. I think he did will hop the corner, but I think he will hop the corner to try to wreck Ty Gibbs. So I think he definitely did that intentionally, and I think he did that on purpose. Ty Gibbs, after, spoke to the media, and he says, I have 13 wins, and Sam Mayer has 2. Now, I mentioned Austin Hill as well because Austin Hill says he also has lost a lot of respect for Sam Mayer, which to me, I don't know why Austin Hill's more mad at Sam Mayer. He should probably be more mad at Cole Custer because, in my honest opinion, Cole Custer got basically wrecked Austin Hill, unfortunately, which collected him in that situation. But going back to Ty Gibbs' instance, while I think Ty Gibbs has had a history, and I think a lot of people are going to ask, was the move fair or foul that Sam Mayer played? Look, was it the most fair move? No, absolutely not, and maybe a little bit dirty. But look, Ty Gibbs has had this coming for a very, very long time. And these two have had a history for the last 2 years. So I'm not really shocked, and I'm not really surprised. They both ended up basically getting into each other in their history. They've been racing against each other for years. They've had a rivalry since ARCA that's been going on for the last 2 years. And again, I think Ty Gibbs' comments were funny. But again, I'm not shocked and surprised by the slightest that this ended up happening. Ty Gibbs got into Sam Mayer, even though really didn't get behind him and wreck him. He just moved him up the track and nearly wrecked him. But still, I'm not shocked and surprised that Sam Mayer got retaliation and got the victory. And I think a lot of fans like myself do agree that while maybe it had been a little bit dirty and a little bit harsh on Sam Mayer's part, like I said, Ty Gibbs has had it coming for a very, very long time. And he's kind of earned that reputation where he's probably going to get wrecked if he does stupid stuff on the racetrack. And he's done a lot of dumb things on the racetrack before. So it's not a major shocker and a major surprise that that ended up happening. While I'm disappointed that Sam Mayer, some are disappointed, I have no problem with it personally. And I'm not shocked and surprised that Sam Mayer did that. And now we're going to jump on to the next story of today's episode as we are talking about Netflix. Now, it was reported by Adam Stern on Friday that NASCAR is in advanced discussions with Netflix to have this season's playoffs docuseries aired on the streaming platform per sources, and what could be a notable boost for the racing property. Obviously, there's been a lot of motorsports that's been kind of headed to the Netflix area. Obviously, F1 has had Drive to Survive. Now, this docuseries is Race for the Championship that was on USA. But, let's be honest, the TV ratings were not very good on USA. But here's a major issue and major problem. Those were aired, I believe, on Thursday nights or Friday evenings. And a lot of people, no disrespect, tune into stuff on late evenings. We already talked about in the Asterix, when you have races or any events on cable, especially on USA, when you have Thursday night football going on, less people, of course, are going to tune in to Race for the Championship. Airing it on Netflix would be absolutely huge for the sport. And what would it do? It would attract that 18 to 49 demographic. NASCAR is needing to try to chase that younger demographic if they're going to survive long term. NASCAR's fan base, it's no secret, is much older than most fan bases, maybe outside of golf. I think NASCAR might have the oldest fan base of any sport out there in the world. So NASCAR, no secret, needs to find a way to attract that younger demographic. And they're trying to do that, at least with the CW for the Xfinity Series. But moving it over there to Netflix, I think will be really, really huge. And I think it will absolutely play a big role. NASCAR's been making a lot of big, really huge moves recently. They got the NASCAR Classics app that came up very, very recently. You've obviously got other things they've been doing. We've already talked about NASCAR's exclusive license to motorsports games likely being gone at the end of this year and having multiple games being made. And now NASCAR is looking to go after the 18 to 49 demographic. But we have been, at least in some essence, being seen a little bit of uptick in percentage of the demographic. We've obviously only sometimes at 18-19% of average 18-49 demographic. You're seeing that number get in the 23 to 24% range, which isn't great by any stretch of imagination, but it's definitely starting to improve. I think NASCAR is becoming more attractable, and I think moving to Netflix is only going to increase that. Now, you might get some snob heads because Formula One has a lot of fans that are basically Drive to Survive enthusiasts, and you might get some NASCAR fans that are just like that, but some of us fans aren't going to be like that. We're just going to enjoy the documentary, and I'm glad to see that Netflix and NASCAR are having conversations about this. I think this is an absolute huge step for the sport that they're talking about this. I think this is a huge win, and overall, in my opinion, I am very happy and glad to see that NASCAR is having conversations with Netflix to try to get the property over there. Just hope we don't get as many stops, but honestly, I think this is a huge win. And again, NASCAR needs to be looking at the 18 to 49 demographic. There's always talk about those TV talks, and they're talking about maybe going to more of a streaming platform like Amazon for the Cup Series TV deal. I think this is a step in the right direction, and NASCAR's starting to really get their heads out of their butts, and they're making great decisions overall. So I think this is awesome. I think this is great stuff, and glad to see that NASCAR is having conversations about moving some of their stuff to Netflix, which I think is something that has needed to happen for a very, very long time. I still think there'll be more people watching Drive to Survive, but I think this docuseries will be successful if it is on Netflix. And now we're going to jump on to the first of two major stories in today's episode as we're talking about Austin Hill. Now, there have been a lot of talks and conversations about Austin Hill and then potentially going to Cup Series, the Drive to 31 car for Kaulig Racing. Well, those talks have been absolutely quelled because it was announced on Thursday evening for the Asterix race that Austin Hill has signed a multi-year contract extension with Childress Racing and a return to the number 21 car for RCR in 2024. Now, he will be in the Xfinity Series on a full-time basis in 2024, but we'll get into what could happen in 2025. Now, I will be honest, I'm a little shocked and surprised that Austin Hill is not going to be going full-time Cup racing in 2024. And I think Chris Rice was a little shocked as well. Now, Chris Rice might be just playing up and trolling a little bit, but also he might be a little shocked as well that he's not going to have Austin Hill in the 2024 season driver, because he had been the favorite to go to the 31 car for College Racing for 2024. But why is Austin Hill staying at Richard Childress Racing in 2024? Well, a big reason is loyalty. And I don't blame him. You look at what he's been doing at RCR this year. He's been doing a really great job with the team. He's gone on to win 4 races and could win the championship in 2023. And with it likely at this point that John Nemechek is moving up to the Cup Series full-time in 2024, I do believe that Austin Hill could win the Xfinity Series Championship next year in 2024. I think he's got to be the favorite at this point. Now, there's other questions that need to be answered when it comes to Austin Hill. What happens past 2024? Austin Hill does say that he does not have any Cup plans for 2024 at this point set. He could drive for Beer Motorsports on a part-time basis, or maybe Rich Childress Racing's number 33 car that we saw Brody Kosecki drive this year at the Indy Road Course. But right now, those plans are not finalized at this time. But 2025, he could go Cup racing if RCR is able to grab a charter. I think that there is a chance that Austin Hill will be full-time in the Cup Series in 2025 with a charter, but at least for next year, he'll be in the Xfinity Series on a full-time basis. And I think stability is a good thing. Look, Austin Hill, though, is getting a little bit older. Maybe he's starting to follow the Greg Biffle route. Because Austin Hill, he's not a young driver. Austin Hill is 28 or 29 years old, and you're kind of almost past that prospect point. And he has made Cup starts up at this point. I think Austin Hill definitely fits the Cup Series, but why would you leave the Xfinity Series when you're having a really, really strong year? Again, I think he's still going to be really good next year and be a championship threat and contender, and then go to College Racing and maybe struggle a little bit. I'm not completely surprised at that situation. But now the big question lies on who is now going to get that 31 car. So with Austin Hill off the market at this point, who gets a 31 car? There are some people that could have a chance to go to the 31 car. The first driver is Chandler Smith. Chandler Smith currently drives a 16 car for College Racing in the NASCAR Xfinity Series and has done a pretty good job with that team this year. However, I just don't think Chandler Smith is fully ready to go Cup racing in 2024. I just don't think at this point he's ready. He's made a couple starts and has kind of done a good job, but he doesn't have enough experience starts to get a chance to go Cup racing. Then you also have Daniel Hemrick. Daniel Hemrick does have sponsorship and funding with them currently at the moment, so I could see him going full-time, and they're obviously asking for sponsorship funding, but I just don't know if he's ready to make the jump up the goal. He's ran in Cup before, and he did drive for College Racing in the 16 car. Then you have some outside factors. I think there's 2 drivers that come to mind. The first one is Carson Hocevar. Carson Hocevar had liked a tweet from College Racing about a week or 2 ago, and Carson Hocevar has been rumored heavily to potentially be going full-time Cup racing in the 2024 season. Now, a lot of people are linking him more to that 77 car Force Fire Motorsports than anything else, but I would imagine that Carson Hocevar is still a potential candidate that could get an opportunity and shot to drive that car next year. But the main candidate who I think has a really good chance is actually Noah Gragson. Now, Noah Gragson, a lot of people like myself think there's more of a chance he'd go back to Xfinity, but I think now if Austin Hill staying in the Xfinity Series next year, I think the 31 car has become an open, available spot for Noah Gragson. Now, look, does Noah Gragson have a good rookie year? No, absolutely not. He struggled. But I do want to reiterate that I'm not going to put full blame on Noah Gragson for what's happened. Noah Gragson struggled at Legacy Motor Club, and a lot of it is because Legacy Motor Club had a bad year. Now, Noah Gragson made mistakes off the racetrack with liking that social media post on Instagram, and he got in trouble because of that. But Noah Gragson struggled because of Legacy Motor Club. I think if he goes to the 31 car, I think he'll do a better job. So I think Noah Gragson has actually still got a good chance of making Cup. Now, I still think there's a good chance he goes back to Xfinity or runs in trucks at this point. But I'm thinking at this point, there's a really good chance that we are going to end up seeing Noah Gragson in the 31 car, which would be pretty cool, and I think he would do better in the 31 car, because obviously Justin Haley is not going to be in that car as he goes to Ricker Racing, but there could be also potential that we see 2 full-time call cars available, because A.J. Allmendinger is not committed right now past the 2024 season. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens and who gets in the rides, but Austin Hill is going to be going back to RCR next year, which I think overall is a great move for Austin Hill. And now we're going ahead to jump on to the final major story of today's episode, as we're talking about Denny Hamlin in 23XI Racing. Now, Denny Hamlin is not signed past 2023, as this is a contract year for Denny Hamlin. And Denny Hamlin has spoken to media this past weekend on that. He says he has still not signed an extension for 2024. Now, he still loves Joe Gibbs Racing and does want to return to JGR in 2024. Now, a lot of people are going to correlate this move and say that this is a very similar move to what happened with Kyle Busch. But this is not the same thing. Well, yes, I do think some sponsorship is playing a factor and a role. There's multiple other factors that are coming into play. The main one is 2311 Racing. 2311 Racing, which the team of Denny Hamlin owns, has not signed an extension for 2024 because very similar to Denny Hamlin, they're also on a contract year with Toyota and they need to still sign their extension. There's other factors coming, and I think that it comes to the leverage of the TV deal that might be to play a role and a factor as well. But there's a little interesting little tidbit that has come out very recently. Chris Knight, who owns Catchments.com, put out an article discussing about the dilemma with Denny Hamlin. And according to him, Ford has approached 2311 Racing and has had meetings with 2311 Racing. Earlier this week on the Door Bumper Cleared podcast, it had been reported by them that Ford has apparently been having conversations with multiple Ford teams. It sounds like 2311 Racing may be one of those organizations. Now, if Joe Gibbs Racing was to lose Denny Hamlin at the end of the season, it would be an absolute blunder for not just Joe Gibbs Racing, but also 2311 and Toyota in general. Because Denny Hamlin has been a Toyota driver since the 2008 season and has been driving for Joe Gibbs Racing at least since the 2004 season. Because it would be an absolute blunder if they lost Denny Hamlin. Now, if Denny Hamlin was to leave Toyota and go to Ford, he obviously would probably go to the 10 car for Stewart-Haas Racing, which would be absolute shock. But honestly, nothing has surprised me at this point. We've seen a lot of crazy, silly season moves that have ended up happening over the last few years. We've obviously seen drivers move that we didn't think were going to move in this silly season. We've obviously seen Kyle Busch move away from Joe Gibbs Racing after being at that team for a very, very long time, starting back in 2008. And then he left and went to Childress Racing, had a very successful first year. We've seen other really big blunders. We've seen Casey Kane leave basically the petty team and went over to Hendrick Motorsports. And then see Dale Jr. leave DEI and head over and drive for Hendrick Motorsports starting in the 2008 season. It would be a massive blunder for Denny Hamlin because he's been with the team for a very, very long time. But I think a major reason why the deal also has not been signed is because of Legacy Motor Club. Legacy Motor Club is going to become a Toyota team in the 2024 season, and I think that's a major factor too. I think having another Toyota team could be an issue. We know that David Wilson wants to keep Denny Hamlin around, and they've said this publicly, but we heard the same thing there. But I think, let's talk about my chances. Do I think that Denny Hamlin is going to get an extension done with Joe Gibbs Racing? I think it's very, very likely. I think it's dropped a little bit down from probably 90-95%, probably down to 80-85% range, but I still think that Denny Hamlin is going to get an extension with the team. Look, I know that there's some, you want all chaos and craziness, but in all seriousness, it would be a very bad blunder for Toyota to lose him. Now, if Denny Hamlin does get let go from Joe Gibbs Racing, goes to another team, and like SHR, John Hunter would become the favorite to take over the 11 car. But there's a lot of talk that John Hunter is likely going to go to 42 car next year for Legacy Motor Club. But that could absolutely change too if Denny Hamlin is let go. But I'm expecting at this point that Denny Hamlin's going to get extended. However, if that does happen, Denny Hamlin goes to Ford and 2311 Racing does go to Ford. Bubba Wallace and Tyler Reddick would be both signed for next year. But Bubba Wallace, I believe, would also be on maybe a contract extension at the end of the year, maybe needing one because I think Bubba's only signed through the end of next season, so he only goes through 2024. Reddick, of course, has a multi-year deal with the team, but this could open up the possibility for potentially some Ford drivers getting a chance and opportunity. Zane Smith comes to mind. If Zane doesn't go to the 10, or maybe Denny Hamlin drives to the 11 for 2311 next year, maybe we see Zane Smith go to the 10 and maybe have an alliance for 2311. Maybe see in the future Haley Deegan, she gets a chance or opportunity. Maybe it's opens up possibly for Riley Herbst or Cole Custer getting a chance and opportunity. If 2311 goes to Ford, that would be an absolute bombshell and a crazy move because they're the second Toyota team. But Toyota historically has dropped a lot of drivers over the years. They're going to get Eric Jones back, but they lost Eric Jones for a few years. They had lost Noah Gragson at the time. And in general, they've had a lot of big blunders like losing Kyle Busch and other drivers in the Toyota camp. And William Byron comes to mind. I know he's more of a loan than anything else to KBM because they were the best Truck Series team and they wanted to give him the best opportunity chance to be very, very competitive. Again, I still think it's very likely Denny Hamlin is going to return to JGR in 2024. But if they lose Denny Hamlin at the end of this season, it'll be an absolute blunder for Toyota and Joe Gibbs Racing, an absolute shock. And I do hope they find a way to get Denny Hamlin extended, because I want to see the whole Joe Gibbs Racing stable be able to stay a unit. They've been really strong this year. It seems like they're starting to get faster as years progress. And Denny Hamlin still has a really good chance to win the championship this year, and obviously just picked up his 50th career win in the Cup Series, becoming only like the 12th or 13th driver in NASCAR Cup Series history to do that. But at this point, I don't think anything's off the table. I think there's a chance it does end up happening, that we see Denny Hamlin leave the team and goes like SHR, but I think more than likely we see Denny Hamlin get the extension. But I think it'd be absolutely shocking if 2311 Racing does end up switching to Ford, but it's going to be crazy and interesting to see what happens when it comes to that, and we'll see if 2311 Racing does in fact leave or does go to another organization to stay around. So, that is going to be for today's NASCAR news and motorsports news video. I want to thank you guys for watching. Please like, subscribe to the channel, notifications on so you know if I win a video does go live on my channel. Follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, and support my Patreon as well. Links go below that, and comment your thoughts below on today's video. Do you think a Denny Hamlin 2311 stay with Toyota or not? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And what are your thoughts about Austin Hill returning to RCR in 2024? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Later today on the channel, we're going to have the NASCAR Truck Series race picks for Milwaukee. Then tomorrow on the channel, we're likely going to have the 2024 NASCAR Cup Series drive lineup predictions for the 2,000 subscriber special. And then, of course, the NASCAR Xfinity Series race picks for Daytona. And then, of course, Wednesday, I'll have a NASCAR news video on the channel. Thursday, I'll have race picks for the Cup Series race at Daytona. Friday, we'll have the NASCAR Xfinity Series race review from Daytona. Of course, the NASCAR news video. And then, of course, Saturday night will be the NASCAR Cup Series race from Daytona. Got a lot of great content dropping on the channel really soon. I hope you enjoy coming out. So anyways, like I said, I want to thank you guys for watching today's video, and I'll see you guys next time for more great, awesome NASCAR content and other motorsports content on the channel like this. Take care, everybody.